questionnaire-based research will become dominant in this pandemic days as well as post-COVID days. Till now, if you look into the various researches that are going on in anthropology and other social sciences, we find an umpteen number of researches are based on, questionnaire. Now, my title is Designing a Good Questionnaire, Half the Job is Done, because questionnaire is the tool that we use in collecting the data. Now, we have to be very careful in designing the questions, arranging the questions in a logical manner, sequencing the questions, and finally executing the questions or canvassing the questions among the participants. You see, if we go to the next slide, you will see that, may I have the next slide? You will see that the first evidence that I received is on the questionnaire that was first developed by Statistical Society of London in 1838 and got published in Royal Asiatic Society, and page number 5 to 13. And in the next slide, you will see the list of questions. The questionnaire was prepared on the basis of, next slide please, on the basis of, the objective of the study was queries of Statistical Society of London relating to strikes. Strikes that takes place. So there was a research conducted on strikes, why the strikes are taking place, which are the unions who play a very dominant role, and what were the income level of the workers before the strike, where the strike got initiated. So these were the list of questions. I presented 19, but there were 50 questions, such questions. And if you look at the response, there is no response. So these are all open-ended questions that were presented. But in course of time, the approach towards designing of questions changed. We go for close-ended. We become very careful while recording the response codes and so on. But before that, let me start with two anecdotes. The first one is, all of us have experience in traveling by a long distance train. And as soon as we board the train, we try to locate our berth, place our luggage, and then try to look into who are my co-passengers. Now, then we start gradually talking to them, chatting to them with some warming up dialogues, like, what is your destination? Is it the place where you stay, or whether the place of destination is your native place? What are you doing? And gradually this discussion or this chatting goes on, and gradually we talk about various issues, maybe personal issues, and with time we become close to each other. There may be other occasions where we do not like to talk much with the co-passenger because I may not find my co-passenger very interesting. So this experience all of us perhaps have in our repository. Now, the second, that means if you develop a fine tuning with your co-passenger, then you keep on exchanging your ideas, your views, and later maybe on some sensitive issues. And if the passengers are fellow Bengalis, then we often go into discussing about the political issues. Jokes apart, my second anecdote is, say for example, we were.
Slide is not moving.
The second anecdote is, say for example, in a Sunday afternoon, after a sumptuous lunch, we are enjoying a soap opera that is going on in a television set, and suddenly the doorbell rang. And we open the door and we find a marketing representative standing in front and was requesting that to respond to some of his or her questions. I may feel disgusted and I may close the door. I said that I don't have time. But on other occasions, if the marketing representative is well articulate, could convince me convincingly that, well, I have come for such and such purpose, I need some responses from you regarding a particular product, and if he can establish a good rapport with me, then I will start responding to it. But if the number of questions are huge, I may again find disgusting, and somehow I would like to just close the door and say, okay, goodbye, thank you. Now, what I'm telling to you is a questionnaire is not only a list of questions. It is not only a list of questions, 30, 40 questions for which we want an answer. It is an instrument. It is an instrument that accomplishes a research project's objectives. And I also consider a questionnaire actually is a link between the interviewer and the respondent. So I consider a combination of good questions and a good interviewer is becomes a very crucial for any interview. Now coming to my next slide, the two main objectives of designing a questionnaire. Next slide, please. First objective is to maximize the response rate. We want to get as much as possible data or respondents to respond to my questions. And the second one is simultaneously, we also wish to have some relevant, accurate information through our questionnaires. Now, how to get the maximum response rate? The first one is to establish good rapport, as Chakravarti Mahajan was talking, to establish rapport, and also as an anthropologist, we are given the training how to establish a rapport. Second, we have to explain about the purpose of our study. And third, you may not get everybody responding to you immediately. The participant may refuse, few of the participants may refuse, and that's not a big issue, because in materials method, when we write a research paper, we also document that how many participants did not respond it, right? Because it is always a voluntary in nature. But there is always a chance that the researcher should take the opportunity to convince the respondents or the participants to take part. And third, and the fourth one is the length of a questionnaire. If you start asking questions from 1 to 50 in one go, then certainly the response rate will become thin, right? So it is always advisable to go with a question. If you are planning to do with a questionnaire-based research, go to the field 2 to 3 times with different sets of questions. Coming to my right side column, accurate, relevant information. How we can achieve this accurate, relevant information? The first one is we have to give some thought to what questions we are asking. The way we are asking. Are we taking an authoritarian tone asking the questions, or are we asking a question in a suspicious tone? In which way we are asking a question? Third, how the ordering of the questions. Am I jumping from one question to other, or the questions are arranged in a very serial, logistically sequential manner so that it appears that we are having a casual discussion or dialogue with each other? And finally, the general layout of the questionnaire. May I have my next slide, please? So the validity of the results of a questionnaire-based research depends upon that how much the question must provide a valid and reliable measure. Second, it should clearly communicate the question to the participant or the respondent so that all participant response understand the questions in the same manner, not in a different manner. And third, the questions must be assembled into a logical and clear fashion so that the respondents may feel interested and continue to cooperate. So what I feel that good questionnaires are really difficult to construct. Next slide, please. And a bad questionnaire difficult to analyze. I'm repeat, a good questionnaires are difficult to construct. Bad questionnaires are difficult to analyze. Why? I'll come to that. So the objectives of this lecture are the steps of designing a questionnaire, list and describe the different question forms, rephrasing and rewording of questions, sequencing the questions in a logical manner, and finally, the layout of the questionnaire. So these 5 points are very important, and these are the objectives of this lecture. Next one. Now, step 1. First is, before designing a questionnaire, you have to look into your project proposal, right? And also simultaneously at the objectives of your study. What is the objective of your study? Then, based on that, you prepare a rough listing of the questions. Say, for example, why students prefer to opt anthropology as a subject of study. Say, for example, if this is your objective of your study, why students opt anthropology as a subject for study? So, to meet this objective, you first need to list up some rough questions. The common questions that we include: your name, how old are you, do you stay, the place of stay, how much you secured, marks you scored in entrance exam, higher secondary, why you have opted for anthropology at undergraduate level, who motivated you. So these are the factors that might affect a student or provoke a student to take anthropology as a master's or undergraduate course. Also, we consider the economic condition, the availability of courses or colleges in the near locality, and so on. But if you look at the questions, these questions are not well worded. These questions needs to be rephrased, reworded, because there are a lot of anomaly in these questions. So after jotting down the list of questions, now concentrate on how these questions can be reworded. Say, for example, if you ask, what is your name? In a village, if you go, if you ask, or in any community, if you go, if you ask, what's your name to a respondent, the respondent may say, my name is Vicky, because Vicky, this is his nickname. So you don't know, the respondent will not know what name you are asking for. But if you make it specific, that what name do you use for official purpose, or what was your age at the time of your last birthday, what is your present address? You see, these questions are very precise. Every respondent will respond equally to it. Why you have opted for anthropology? Who are the people motivated you to opt for this subject? Instead of asking what is your father's education, you can put a question in this way: to which standard your father could study? Look at the guarded language. To which standard your mother could study? If you have siblings, at which standard they are studying at present? So this is the way by which you can rephrase your questions already listed. So from rough listing to polished one. This is the third step that you need to take over. Let me give some example. This is another example where we try to collect data, when we try to collect data on knowledge, attitude, and practice towards family planning. Now, the first question usually we should ask is, are you married? Then, for how long you are married? Because that is important. If a woman gets married 1 week before, and if you start asking about family planning, about offspring, then it becomes very ridiculous. So the second question would be, for how long you are married? Are you still in wedlock? Do you have any offspring? If yes, how many? If no, then go to question number 10. Question number 10 says, then why? So you see, you need to put some loopings inside your questionnaire so that there is no need of answering to all the questions if the respondent doesn't have the answer to it, right? And if you look at the questions, you see the questions are arranged in a very logical and sequential manner. And while canvassing this question, I also would advise that don't ask the questions in a question answer asking form. Try to have some casual dialogue. Say, for example, are you married? Oh, I see you are married. Then how long are you married? Or are you still living in wedlock? So you see, the way you are asking the question is very important, because otherwise the respondent will become very conscious about your intention, or what you are will become suspicious about your purpose. So it should be a casual dialogue with the respondents, and a researcher should be well versed with the questions that she or she will be asking in a sequential manner. My second question, the second example is, this is an attitude towards computer and its application. There was a program where I was a part, where a group of Jadavpur University Computer Science Department wanted to introduce computer education course in a village in Sundarban, a model village. Now, the questions are like this. Are you interested to know about a computer if we provide you the opportunity free of cost? You see, the second one, if we provide you the opportunity free of cost. Yes, no. If no, then go to question number 4. Why are you not interested? If it's interested, then the question comes, are you interested to learn computer applications? If we provide you the opportunity free of cost. This opportunity of free of cost is important because that will give a freedom to the respondent to respond to that particular question. Number three, if yes, why are you interested in knowing its applications? And here you go for a free listing because you might not be knowing the list of options the participants will be talking about. So in a questionnaire, another point that I would like to make, you can have close-ended response, you can have open-ended, that doesn't matter. And this is a continuation of the third example that I was giving. Why are you not interested to know about computer? Because you need to know why the participant is not interested, because this is also a part of your research. Or are you interested to learn about the uses of internet? Yes or no? If no, then why? And if interested, then why you are interested to learn about? You see, three or four things I want to make from this presentation, from these slides, that the logical arrangement of the questions, the language of the questions, the way you are asking the questions, these are very important. Now, step 4. Now you have listed the questions. Now you have to have in your mind what could be the response options. You may have a complete range of possible responses for a particular questions. You may not have a complete range. If you do not have a complete range, then please leave it open. That doesn't mind. You later on can categorize or scale it. But if you have the possible options that you can gather from existing literature or from your study, then you can put the options in your own against each of these questions. So step 4 is to possible response options you have to frame. Next one, step 5. Step 5 is very important because response options and questions go together, because you need to put all this data, the responses, in the analysis pot, and you need to analyze it. But before, if you don't give a thought to it, after coming back from field, completing the questionnaire, filling up the questionnaire, at the time of analysis, you might be in a soup. You might be missing some data. You might be thinking that, well, I have not collected this information, or this response is not correct. So you have to consider what type of analysis you wish to do before you canvass the questionnaire in the field. So step 5, think about how the data will be processed, and that will following the objective of your study. Now coming to the next slide, step 6. Step 6 is logic and flow of the interview, the sequencing of questions, and initial questions should be warming up questions, as we always do, and the later questions should be dealt with some sensitive issues if the objective of your study demands so. So warming up questions, as I gave an example with a train journey, that we start with some warming up questions. What are you, where are you, what is your destination, how far, how long you have stayed in this city. These are warming up questions, not harmful, casual questions. And then you move on to the sensitive ones, maybe about the property, maybe about family planning issues, and so on. The next slide is step 7. If you are not canvassing your questionnaire personally, if you are mailing it, then you have to give a clear instruction, powerful introduction, so that once that questionnaire reaches the participant will come to know what is the purpose of your study. Otherwise, if you are actually canvassing in person, then clearly said that, well, I am coming from such and such academic institute, my purpose is to do this, and my whole objective of my research is this. Put it in a very simple language, the people will understand, and don't hide anything. So once you open up, then the people will get confidence that, well, this person has come not from any government office. The person has come for his own personal purpose, and make it open. Don't hide anything that I will be doing, tell them anything that I will be helping you in this such and such. Initially, you may get some refusal, but that doesn't matter, because many of them will again come back to respond to your questions after you spend a considerable time in your field. So that is very important, and that's also a part of ethics, I think. The fourth one is, when we prepare the questions, we have a tendency to squeeze the questions to save space. That actually creates a lot of problem. Instead of circling one response, you will put the circle in another response, tick mark, right? Or you may miss the questions, right? You will be in a hurry to complete the questionnaire as soon as possible. So try to provide space, and also between the codes, right? That you have read. Step 8. Please test your questionnaire before going to the field, because this testing of questionnaire will help you to revise the questions again and again and refine it, polish it, so that it doesn't create any hindrance in conducting the field work or in the or canvassing the question in the actual course of field. So testing is very important. You can test this on 10 to 20 individuals and try to see whether the language is correct, whether the question that is been asked is meaningful to the participant, relevant to the participant, or is this question is a particular question creating a lot of controversy among the participants. So this testing and revising is very important, and this is the final step of the question that you can this is a flow chart that I have prepared. Next one. First, prepare your objectives. Second, decide on the data collection method. Third, determine the content. What will be the content of your questions? What type of questions you are going to ask? What will be the wording of the questions? What could be the sequence of the questions, that is arrangement of the question? Which question will precede whom? Which question will follow which question? So this one, these things. Second, the response format, the seventh one, that is also important. The layout of the questions. Pre-testing is the 9th point. 10th point is revise and implement. And this is the 10th, these are the 10 steps which I would like to suggest before you prepare and canvass a questionnaire in the field. Coming to my next slide, question framing. Question framing, the first point is whether we will go for a structured or an unstructured one. In each question, is each question relevant and properly worded? Check, recheck, again check. Ask your fellow faculty, fellow scholars to go through the wordings of the questions, right? What about the layout and appearance of the questionnaire? Conducive to accurate and easy data collection. Now coming to my next slide, deciding what to ask. Because you have your objective in your mind. So what would be your dependent variables? And to get an answer to these dependent variables, what could be my independent variables? Say, for example, if you are working on blood sugar level, right? You will be measuring blood sugar level, and you are also trying to find out the concomitants of blood sugar level. So what could be the probable independent variables that may affect or determine the sugar level? So these are all independent variables you have to list up. And also you have to find out what are the confounding variables. So all these data should be there. All this information should be there in your questionnaire. So deciding what to ask is very important. And then if you look at the slide, the next slide, first write down a question and then ask yourself, can the research objectives be fulfilled without this question? If it is yes, then delete the question. If it is no, then keep it as a candidate for revision and re-examination. So don't unnecessarily load the questionnaire by putting unnecessary questions which are not perhaps relevant to the objectives of your study. So write down a question, think, rethink, keeping in mind always the purpose of your study, the objective of your study. Now coming to some open-ended questions that we often, mostly what we do, that there are some questions that we ask in course of our research for which we do not have some coded answers. Say, for example, what is your opinion about introduction of emergency contraceptive pill in the country? You may not have the proper response list. So in such a case, you leave it open. Get the answers from the respondents. Later on, there is always a chance you can group this into different categories. Or say, for example, what do you like most about owning your own home? So these are subjective, and this subjective later can be coded. But if you do not have the response options ready with you, then leave it open. Later on, you can code it. There are some advantages also. There are some disadvantages also. And you all know about the advantages and disadvantages of this non-structured and open-ended questions. Firstly, you are not guiding or you are not tutoring or influencing by giving the code to the participant that what questions, what will be the response. You are not restricting the response among the respondents. You are not influencing them. But there are also advantages to it, because you will get, when it is important to measure the salience of an issue, when too many possible responses would be there and these responses are not known to you. There are advantages also, but there are disadvantages. Many of us know what are the disadvantages, because a participant may not be well articulate. A participant may find it very difficult to respond. You may find that the participant is not responding to an open-ended questions also. So there are disadvantages, there are advantages, and it depends upon the acumen of the researcher, how to put the questions and how to get the answers from the participant. Because most of the occasions what happens that when you visit a field, when you interview a respondent, many other people will flock around and they will try to respond to those. Or the participant may feel hesitate to respond to some sensitive questions in presence of family members, right? Or they may keep mum. So here, the role of the researcher is to motivate, is to isolate, or is to get the accurate information from the participant. Now coming to the close-ended. Close-ended, we often say it is very easy to analysis. It is very easily to analyze, less time consuming, easy to understand. You are limiting the options and you are getting the things. But there are a lot of disadvantages also. The disadvantages, say for example, if you ask, do you smoke cigarette? Now a participant may smoke cigarette once in a while when some friends offers or some peers offer, but not a regular. The participant will be confused, yes or no. Or if you ask a participant, maybe an urban participant, that have you ever watched CNN News? Yes, the participant perhaps watched while a soap opera is going on in a particular channel and the advertisement is displayed. So the participant may switch over to CNN News to have a view of what is going on, and then again come back after the advertisement is over in that soap opera channel. So that doesn't mean that the participant observes or watches CNN News or the participant smokes cigarette. So you have to specify what to mean by smoking cigarette. Maybe at least once a day, at least few minutes or few hours in a day you watch CNN News. So these are very important while you ask a question. Otherwise, you will land up with some distorted or disturbed data that may create sounds and noises in your data set, and you will come up with a wrong estimate. So be careful what you are asking. Second thing, if you are asking how many cigarettes you smoke per day, if you ask how many cigarettes you smoke per day, you may categorize less than 5. We always have a tendency to categorize initially, but my humble submission to all of you is don't categorize while canvassing the questionnaire. Keep it, try to get the exact number. The categorization can be done later part, but if you categorize at the initial level, then when you will prepare the table, frequency distribution table, you will not know to which end of the class interval the data are skewed. So it's always better to keep it open 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you go for a statistical distribution, say maybe quartile distribution, maybe tertile distribution, and try to get the frequency against each of these variables. So please do not categorize any of the variables, numerical variables, at the very outset, right? When you are canvassing the questionnaire in the field. Second is another example, that how frequently you go to theater to see a movie in a month. At least once, 2 to 5. Please don't do it. Try to get the exact figure and later on you categorize. Next point is, some of the responses may be dichotomous. Agree, disagree, right? But between agree and disagree, there can be many voices, right? So you will not be able to get those voices between agree and disagree. If I ask you a question, how much this research methodology workshop is, do you agree that this research methodology workshop is useful to you? If you are given two options, agree or disagree, some participant may be confused, may want to post their opinion in between agree and disagree. So in such cases, you should go for a variability in the response by varying the strength of wording, right? So, and that is called a Likert style scale. Say, for example, you may go for strongly disagree, disagree, agree, strongly agree, cannot, decide. So you can go for a 5-point or 7-point Likert scale, or you can give score also and ask the respondent to score. 1 is the strongly disagree and 9 is strongly agree, right? So this scale is very important. And here you may encounter another important feature that if you are working on some non-literate group, I dislike using the word illiterate. I prefer to use the word non-literate group. You can ask the participant to put a mark between the extremely interesting to extremely dull, which end of the line the participant want to post his response. But the problem lies with this type of response list is if you have 10 questions with similar response, strongly agree, strongly, moderately agree, and this, there is always a tendency among the respondents, there will be always a tendency among the respondent to respond to a particular end, right? This is called habituation. This is called habituation. We are all familiar with this. Sometimes we receive call from a mobile service provider and ask us to rate their service in different aspect, and they give a score 1 to 10, where which score you want to give. So we always have a tendency, if always the response range is between 1 to 10, if we first tell 7, then first response is 7, then there will be always a tendency among the participant to respond to 7, all the time for all the 5 questions. So what will be advisable is to change the arrangement of the response rate, or change the wordings, because once you change the wordings of the responses for every question which has this degree of likelihood, then what will happen? The participant will give a thought before responding to a particular questions. Say, for example, here, habituation, you see strongly disagree, disagree, agree. If you just reorient it, right? Maybe strongly agree, agree, disagree, and strongly disagree. If you just rearrange it in third or fourth question, then the respondent will give a thought before responding to it. Otherwise, it will be monotonous, and by means of by habituation, the respondent will try to stick to the same response for the as the respondent has done for the preceding 4 or 5 questions. Coming to my next slide, which is called closed or forced choice format. In this, you see these are variables that I have given are in nominal scale. What is your marital status? Single, they're mutually exclusive. You cannot be single, married, divorced together, right? So these are mutually exclusive and are in nominal scale. So these are the 4 options: single, married, divorced, widowed, but you should always keep another provision, others, if any, and specify. Here, the researcher should write, if somebody says other, must write what other is. Maybe the respondent is practicing living together, not single, not married, not divorced, not widowed. So we need to keep our option open, because maybe that the respondent may not respond to all these above first 4 options. So these are called forced choice, leaving one option free. Coming to this one, this is actually a multiple category question. In your opinion, which method of family planning is most conducive for? Often I found that many students stick to one answer. The answer may not be restricted to one. A participant may say, I have, there may be 2-3 favorite or most conducive family planning method for that respondent. So let the respondent respond. This freedom should be given because this is not mutually exclusive. One may opt for oral contraceptive, all may also prefer withdrawal, or maybe there is maybe other, if any, specify, which I presented as my last option. So in this multiple category of questions, your total percentage will not come to 100 because there are multiple responses, so the percentage total will not come to 100.0. You can also rank the responses. Say, for example, which of these family planning method you can rank them 1 as most preferred and 5 as least preferred. So this is another way you can also prepare a question where you can get not only the preferences but also the order of preferences of using contraceptive types. Coming to my next slide, double-barreled question. This double-barreled question means when you are trying to pump in 2 responses in one question. Say, for example, if I ask you, please rate the lecture in terms of its content and presentation. You may like the content, might not be the not the presentation, or the other way around, or may you like both, you may not like both. So a respondent will get confused in this type of double-barreled questions when you are asking 2 questions in one question, wanting two answers for one question. So it is always better to split the question into 2 parts. So careful about using this double-barreled question. And also there is another example. How many cups of tea and coffee do you drink in a day? So cups of coffee and tea, you split it. First question, cup of coffee, and second, cups of tea. Or if you look at the last part of the slide, do you favor or oppose not allowing gays and lesbians to legally marry? You see, this is again a double-barreled questions. So you need to split it. My next one is value-loaded questions. Value-loaded questions means, you see, I have made it a blue font, recent education policy, necessary steps, adequate. So these are value-loaded. What do you mean by adequate? What do you mean by necessary? What do you mean by recent education policy? You specify it. It will be better because a respondent may get confused because a respondent will not be able to read your mind, what is the intention of asking this particular specific questions. So avoid value-loaded questions. These are also called leading questions. I'll come to some examples of that. Frame of reference is another important point. Frame of reference means, say for example, if you are asking a question, how often did you borrow books from your library? If I ask this question to a respondent, to my student, my student will get confused. Sir, I regularly come to the university or college and visit library. But if you specify in the past 6 months or in the past week, how many times you visited the library, that means you are giving a time of reference. Or say, for example, in physical activity, when we collect data, we need to give in the past 7 days, how many days you exercised, or you actually did the dusting or mopping, okay? Or you went for walking in the last 1 week periods. So frame of reference is very important. Or say, for example, when we collect morbidity data, we ask during the last 1 month period, what are the health problems, issues that you have encountered. So time of reference is very important when you put a question. These type of questions. Leading questions. Do you think breastfeeding is good for health? When you say good for health, then the respondent mind will drift towards why breastfeeding is good. So the respond will get will be directed to the way, will be directed in that side. Or have you purchased a high quality Sony TV? So leading questions are also very disturbing. You may not get the correct response from the participants. Now coming to some ambiguous question. We often question like this, did you pain last week? Our options are never, seldom, often, very often. How you define seldom? How you define often? Or You may have a definition, how the participant will understand what you mean by seldom. So the response will vary from participant to participant. What I would advise or submit before you, that better to take the exact number per week. Say, for example, you see the rewarding, what I have made. How often have you had pain in the last week? Never. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. See, for example, when your doctor asks about a pain management, that how many days you had pain last time. So you are actually trying to quantify it. You can later change or convert. Seldom means 1 to twice a week, often means 3 times a week, very often means 4 times a week. That you can do while writing your methodology part, that I have converted these variables into never, seldom, often, very often on the basis of this criteria. But while collecting this data from the field, make sure that you get the exact number so that it doesn't create confusion among the participants. Coming to my next point, avoid double negatives. Say, for example, small group teaching should not be abolished. You see, there is a double negative, should not be abolished. So you may rephrase it, small group teaching should continue, because again, this particular double negatives will try to provide a negative response from the participants, and you will be losing the actual response. So be careful about this double negatives. Coming to my next one, be precisely ask the question. Say, for example, when you are asking question, what type of medicine you have taken? The participant may be suffering from a chronic disease. What type of medicine? The participant may say that I am taking paracetamol. I am taking, if you specify what antibiotics are you taking, then the participant will understand that you are actually trying to ask about antibiotics. Even sometimes the doctors ask when we visit them for a particular ailment, do you take any medicine for blood pressure, for blood sugar? You see, it's so specific, not what medicine you take. So be specific and be precise. What type of, what is your intention about a particular question? Hypothetical questions. Make sure that the participants from whom you are collecting the data are aware of this fact. Say, for example, is the time up? Do I have time? Okay, avoid hypothetical questions. Hypothetical questions means, say, for example, we are all aware about Lindo Commission. Lindo Commission about, college and university level elections. This Lindo Commission was formed. And if you ask the chawala or pan bidi cigarette wala outside your college campus or university campus, and you are collecting data on student violence, student agitation, political agitation, and if you ask that chawala or this about Lindo Commission, they will not be able to answer to it. So like this, if you ask a rural woman about, are you aware of your health rights? Might not be aware. So it is not a good question to ask. You may put it in a different way, but don't ask that, do you know that reproductive rights is your right or not? Because that person may be ignorant. So careful about, be sure that what range of questions you are planning to ask. And in that case, what I will suggest, you first ask whether the person has heard about it. If heard, then what is their comment? If not heard, then leave it, right? If you are really serious about asking it, or if you are really interested in asking it, to know it, then split it into two. Instead of directly asking the question, first ask whether aware of it. If yes, what type of awareness? If no, then leave it. Coming to my next part, reliability of a questionnaire. Often we borrow questions, we adopt different questions from tested in different countries or different communities. What we do, we often need to translate it into vernacular language. So first is what is usually done, and that you have to write in materials and methods section, that we adopted this particular questionnaire. The questionnaire was in English or in French. We translated into vernacular and back translated to see whether the consistency is there. So translation, back translation of the questionnaire is required, and then you canvas into some 10 to 15 participants, try to find correlation between the response and say that the questionnaire is highly reliable. So students often ask, or the reviewers of a paper often ask about the reliability of a questionnaire, and in that case, the candidate or the author has to justify how the reliability of that questionnaire is taken, because in many psychological data are collected using questionnaires which are framed by by scholars of different countries or from different situation, or maybe WHO quality of life. This is not we have to take the universality of this, or maybe menopause specific quality of life that we have used in a particular project in our study in India. There we borrowed Hirschlich's questionnaire and we back translated, and then tried to find out the reliability of the questionnaire. Not only reliability, but also we also had to consider the internal consistency. And because this internal consistency refers to the extent to which all the items in a scale are measured, the different aspects of the same attribute. And in that case, we use a statistics which is called Cronbach's alpha. And if you run Cronbach's alpha, you will get a value, and that range is from 0 to 1. And if the Cronbach's value is more than 7 or more, then we can be sure that the internal consistency is very high, and you can well go ahead with that particular type of set of questions. So this is a brief sum up what I have presented so far. These are some naive wordings: age, problem. This is an example of not being specific and also not stating the question in sentence format. The possible improvement could be, what was your age in years at your last birthday? So this will give similar type of response from the participants, right? Or third one, how many times have you been an inpatient in the past year? So the question can be possibly improved. In the past 12 months, how many different times have you been admitted in the hospital as a patient overnight or longer? So what I initially stated, each question should communicate clearly to the respondent what your intention is. Otherwise, you will get a distorted result or response. Level of details. This is very important. It is important to ask for exact level of details required. And also, it is also required to avoid unnecessary details, because people are less interested or less inclined to complete long questionnaires. And in that case, I would suggest to go for 1 or 2 or 3 rounds of fieldwork. In the first round, you may collect data on socio-demography. In the second round, you may collect data on fertility. Third round on lifestyle. What will happen if you go with all sets together? Then the quality of data will not be good, because the respondents will become bored and will try to respond haphazardly. So your objective, you will not get the correct estimate of the objective that you intended to. So level of details is very important. If you want to go to finer levels, then you need to go take up fieldwork, and 2 to 3 or 4 rounds of fieldwork you need to think. Coming to bias, there are some socially desired or questions. Say, for example, if I ask my student that, why did you miss my last class? Or why are you not attending the class for the last 1 week? My student will definitely say, my father was not well, I was not well, like this. But if you ask a question in this way, that within the past month, how many times did your other commitment clash with your lectures? This will give a space to the respondent. This will give a space to my student to respond correctly. It's not that I am inquiring for the purpose of inquiry. I am trying to gather the information, the correct information. You see, the way you are rephrasing the question, that is very important, and how you are putting the question is also very important. Length of the questionnaire I discussed, I will not repeat once more. Arranging the questions from general to particular, easy to difficult, factual to abstract, start with close format, and Start with questions relevant to the subject and not all. So these are very important things, you have to be very careful in preparing a questionnaire. And there is a debate whether a questionnaire is always mailed and a schedule is canvassed personally. I personally believe, and I wrote in different papers also, I can use questionnaire oblique schedule. Nobody objected. There are different research methodology books which differentiate between a questionnaire and a schedule. Personally, I don't subscribe to this division, right? Well, questionnaires can be mailed, but if you are mailing a questionnaire, then you need to give a powerful introduction before you mail it about the purpose, about the objective, about the freedom that the participant may leave any question. This is very important. A researcher always thinks that the participant should respond to all the questions. A participant should be given liberty not to respond a question, and that is also your finding. And you write in your method part that what is the frequency of participants who didn't respond to a particular or a number of questions. That is very interesting. The way you like that when you are doing a study on school children, we always write that how many schools refuse to participate in the study. Say, for example, while I was doing a research on adolescent male reproductive health. So these are very important things what I would like to mention here. The participants should be given freedom not to respond, because if they find this question not answerable, or if they find that income, say for example, many participants may not be inclined to talk about their income, right? You try to get the expenditure. If not, then leave it. And you write that these so many participants, there are other ways to measure income expenditure. You can go by assets. You may go by Kupaswamy index also, right? So there are various ways. A researcher has to find out that what type of response you are unlikely to get from the participants. Now, these are another important thing which I would like to mention here is when you are going for 3 to 4 rounds of questions. Say, for example, the first set of questions is on socio-demography. The second round of question is on fertility. Use colored papers. You know why I'm telling you using colored papers? I have used in my own fieldwork, and I also instruct my students, my scholars, to use colored papers, because that will help you to sort out which questionnaire is meant for whom. You may go for a purple colored paper, blue colored paper, so you can sort out easily that your schedules it will not get mixed up. If you only pick it in black and white, then you might get confused that which questionnaire is for which purpose. Now the slides are appearing, right? Yeah. So colored pages, these are very important. Don't squeeze questions too much. That is another important thing, because we often have a tendency to squeeze the questions so that to accommodate more questions in one page. That will save paper, no doubt, but that may create disturbances in collecting data. You may skip many questions. You may encircle a particular response which is not pertaining to that particular question. Maybe question 4's respond, you are circling on the response of question 5. So give enough space, not only to fill up the questionnaire, but also while entering the data in the computer. That will create less hindrance, right? Coming to the next part, these are some sample questions, schedules that I'll show to you, a household schedule, you see, and always write strictly confidential. Strictly confidential means this blank schedule is not strictly confidential, but the schedule once filled in is strictly confidential, right? Or say, for example, this is a family planning questionnaire. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, you see, this is a questionnaire that we use for family planning. You see the routings are there and how the questions are arranged, and also the spaces that I have provided. This is a menopause-specific live questionnaire. That is a Likert. Next slide, please. Can I get the next slide, please? Yeah. And if you look at the question, this is the title page. And if you move into the next page, next slide, you see, yeah, next one. That next one is more clear. Next one, yeah. If you look at this is a Likert scale. You see, night sweat is a problem during menopause. If the participant may say no, then the problem ends there. But if the participants say yes, then you give the chance to measure the degree of experience from 0 to 6. 0 is least to 6 is most. So this is a scale that we have used in one of our menopause specific quality of life questionnaire, why we try to grade the morbid pattern, not only taking that whether you not in a binary format, but in a continuous format we try to get. So this is a summary. Write out the primary and secondary aims of your study. This is very important because a researcher always needs to keep in mind what is the objective of the study. And based on that objective of the study, you need to frame questions. You need to frame out, chalk out what will be your dependent variables, your independent variables, your confounding variables, what should be the range of responses, what would be your initial set of questions, and second round, what should be the second round of questions that you are asking, third round questions, and finally, you collect it, enter your data, analyze it, and prepare your report. That's all, ma'am. That's all.